Rotation is sold as the premium feature. More addresses, a fresh one on every request. Surely that is more anonymous and therefore better. And for a login account, rotation is often the single fastest way to get flagged. This is one of the most misunderstood choices in the whole stack, because sticky and rotating are not a good option and a worse option. They are two completely different tools built for two completely different jobs, and using the wrong one is how people burn accounts while thinking they are protecting them. This is when each one helps and when it quietly destroys what you built. A sticky proxy holds one address steady for you. You connect, you get an address, and it stays yours for the length of a session, sometimes minutes, sometimes hours, sometimes as long as you keep using it. To anything watching, you look like one connection from one place, staying put the way a real person on a home or mobile connection does. The address does not shuffle underneath you between one click and the next. That steadiness is not a limitation. It is the entire point for anything involving a login, because real people do not change where they are standing several times a minute. What rotating means? A rotating proxy does the opposite on purpose. The address you go out on changes, either on every single request or on a timer, or each time you open a new connection. One moment you appear to be in one city, the next in another, the next somewhere else again. From a large pool, you might use hundreds of different addresses in an hour. This is powerful for the right job and poison for the wrong one. And the difference comes down entirely to whether you are living inside a single continuous identity or firing off many independent anonymous requests that have nothing to do with each other. The session concept, the key idea that makes sense of all this, is the session. When you log into an account, you begin a continuous session, a stretch of activity that belongs to one identity in one place. The platform expects that session to hang together, same person, same rough location, same connection, from login to logout. Everything you do inside it is understood as one human being doing a sequence of things. Rotation shatters that expectation. Sticky preserves it. So the question is never which is more anonymous. It is whether the test is one continuous identity or a swarm of unrelated requests. A login account wants a sticky address held steady, because a person does not teleport across the world in the middle of scrolling a feed. When an account logs in from one city, then appears to jump to another country 3 requests later, then somewhere else after that, all within one session, it is describing something no real human connection ever does. That pattern is not more anonymous. It is a bright, blinking impossibility. The account looks like exactly what it is. One identity being pushed through a shuffling pool of addresses, and that is a fast track to a flag. What rotation is actually for. Rotation earns its keep on a completely different task, one with no login at all. When you are reading large amounts of genuinely public data, many independent page fetches that do not belong to any single identity, rotation spreads those requests across many addresses so no single one gets hammered and rate limited. There is no session to keep consistent, no logged-in person to impersonate, just volume to distribute. Here rotation is exactly right, because the whole goal is to look like many unrelated visitors rather than one, and each request standing on its own address is a feature, not a contradiction. The mid-session jump problem, the specific failure to burn into memory, is the mid-session address jump. An address changing underneath a single login session is the worst of both worlds. It does not make the account more anonymous, because the account is still identified by its login, and it adds an impossibility on top, a user whose location skips around while they stay logged in. Some of the most avoidable account losses come from someone pointing a rotating proxy at a logged-in account, thinking more addresses meant more safety, and instead handing the platform a pattern that screams automation. One login, one steady address for the whole session, always. Sticky session duration. Sticky is not infinitely sticky, and the duration matters. Providers hold an address for you for a certain window, and when that window ends or the underlying connection changes, you may get a new address. For account work, you want that window long enough to cover a full session comfortably, and you want the address to stay the same across your normal sessions where possible, so the account keeps returning from the same place like a real person coming home to the same connection. Understanding your provider's stickiness, how long it holds and when it changes, is part of not getting surprised by an unexpected address shift mid-task. Rotation styles. Rotation itself comes in flavors. Some pools rotate on every single request, a new address for each fetch. Some rotate on a timer, holding an address for a set number of minutes before switching. Some let you rotate on demand, keeping an address until you deliberately ask for a new one. These are tools for shaping how your request volume spreads. Per request rotation maximizes spread for heavy public scraping. Timed rotation gives short-lived mini sessions. On demand puts the control in your hands, which, as we will see, is actually what account work quietly wants, just not in the middle of a session. Account creation wants sticky too. People often reach for rotation at sign-up, thinking a fresh address makes a new account look independent. It is the same mistake. Creating an account is the beginning of a session, the first stretch of that identity's life, and it wants a stable address just as much as any later login does. A sign-up flow where the address shuffles between steps looks broken and suspicious from the very first moment, before the account even exists. Give a new account one clean, steady, appropriately located address for its creation and its early life, and let it settle in from one place like a real new user would. Geo-consistency during rotation. Even when rotation is the right call, it should usually stay within one region rather than scattering across the whole planet. An account or a task that needs to look local should rotate among addresses in the right country, not bounce between continents. Wild geographic scatter is its own signal, and it undoes any locality the task was supposed to have. So rotation is not licensed to ignore geography. It is spreading load while still respecting where the traffic is supposed to come from. Keep the rotation inside the region the story calls for, and the spread stays believable. The rotate on ban myth. A stubborn myth says that when an account gets flagged, giving it a fresh address fixes it. It does not. The account is identified by far more than its current address, the fingerprint, the cookies, the account details, the history. A new address on a flagged identity is a new coat on the same person the doorman already recognized. Worse, cycling a flagged account through a string of fresh addresses just teaches the platform to associate those addresses with the problem, potentially poisoning otherwise clean ones. The address was never the thing that got flagged. Rotating it does not undo the flag, it only spreads the stain. On-demand rotation between sessions. There is a legitimate place for changing an account's address deliberately, and it is between sessions, not during them, and it is done with intention rather than automatically. If an account needs to move to a new steady address, you change it cleanly and then hold the new one steady, so the account simply appears to have come from one consistent place, then later from another consistent place, the way a real person who moved or switched connections would. That is controlled, occasional, deliberate change. It is the opposite of a pool shuffling the address out from under a live session on its own schedule. Buffers and port model and matching to task. Providers usually expose these modes through their setup. A particular address or port that gives you a sticky session, and another that hands you a rotating pool, sometimes with a per-account credential, so each identity gets its own steady exit. Learn how your provider draws that line, because misreading it is how people accidentally point a rotating endpoint at a logged-in account, and then match the mode to the task with a simple rule. Anything with a login, account creation, warm-up, daily use gets sticky and dedicated. Anything that is pure high-volume reading of public data gets rotation. One identity, one steady address, many anonymous requests, many addresses. Match the session window to the task. One practical detail people miss is lining up the sticky window with how long the task actually takes. If your provider holds a sticky address for 10 minutes, but your account session runs half an hour, the address can shift out from under you partway through, turning a sticky setup into an accidental mid-session jump, the exact thing you were trying to avoid. So know your provider's sticky duration and choose a window that comfortably covers a full session with room to spare. For mobile, where change is native, this is more forgiving, but on other connection types, a session that outlives its sticky window is a self-inflicted leak of the worst kind. Test that rotation actually behaves. Do not assume a rotating endpoint rotates the way you think, or that a sticky one stays put. Verify it. Make a few requests and watch the address you come out on. A sticky endpoint should show the same address across a session. A rotating one should show the spread you expect, within the region you expect, not scattered across continents if you asked it to stay local. Providers configure these differently, and a misread setting is how a logged-in account ends up on a rotating pool by accident. A 2-minute check confirms the mode is doing what the label promised before an account depends on it. The honest limit, as always, the mode is a tool, not a cloak. Sticky does not make a reckless account safe, and rotation does not make a scraper invisible. Picking the right one removes a specific contradiction, the impossible teleporting user, or the single overloaded address, and nothing more. The account still has to behave, the fingerprint still has to hold, the details still have to stay separated. What choosing correctly buys you is simply that the network layer stops actively working against you, so the rest of the setup gets a fair chance to do its job. I run sticky dedicated addresses for every logged-in account I own, one steady exit each on real Singapore mobile proxies, and I save rotation for the jobs that are actually many anonymous requests rather than one identity, because I have watched people burn good accounts by pointing a rotating pool at the login and calling it security. Multi-account ops. Com has the full written breakdown of sticky versus rotating, the exact setups for account work versus scraping, and honest reviews of the providers that get the distinction right. No affiliate guesswork. If you want to stop guessing which mode a test needs, that is the place to start. Subscribe for more honest, tested multi-account ops. Next time, why mobile proxies are the gold standard for this whole game, and the one structural fact about how carrier networks are built that makes a mobile address so much harder for a platform to punish than any other kind.